not a rally fan per se, which is to say that I haven't actually stood in front of a safety barrier with my knees being grazed by cars doing 120 miles an hour through the air to get a closer look at them, but I am a fan of rallying, especially the homologated specials that came out of the titanic battles of the 1980s, namely between Audi and Lancia. Audi came in when the four-wheel drive was slipped through into the World Rally Championship regulations, and Lancia said, hold my beer, we've got a rear-wheel drive special. And that's where the battle commences. Lancia versus Audi Quattro versus rear-wheel drive. There's one car on every Lancia driver's bucket list. It's this one, 037 Stradale, the legend. The original Abarth wheel, a tiny bit shaky. You know you're in a rally car when you can see the fuses. Look at these guys. Massive great gear stick. Serious bit of that action. And torch. Presumably because there's not one in the headlining. So you can see where you're going at night. I like that, it's a nice touch. I'm just going to put that back in there. So if you're shopping for the modern equivalent of an Audi Quattro or any used car, van or bike, then make sure you use Car Verticals, check that it hasn't been stolen, clocked or damaged. So if we take the RS3 as an example, a personal favourite for dispatching the highway, never raced or rallied, all you have to do is punch the reg or the VIN number into Car Vertical to get a full and thorough breakdown and report to check for any nasty surprises. So here's a really good example. Lovely colour in the grey, sort of gunmetal grey there. Odometer looks good, so it's got a genuine mileage, hasn't been clocked. Financial legal status are also good, so it doesn't owe any money and it hasn't been stolen, but it does have some juicy damage. Love the crash photos. It's a beautiful car, but it's bent like a banana. Heavy frontal impact with evidence here of some damage to the windscreen and the side as well. Those wheels don't look very well aligned. And wow, it's had a ton of different license plates and a lot of different owners since that impact. So it's really worth checking whether that car's been fixed properly before it got put back on the market, so you don't waste your money, hard-earned cash, buying a dodgy investment. So buy smart, use Car Vertical, use my exclusive link in the description below or my discount code BCD to get 20% off when you use Car Vertical, and make sure you don't buy any nasty surprises. Right, dog leg first gear, handbrake off. Oh, there she goes, make sure that is totally off. That engine tone is so crisp and so pure. This car is super light on its feet. The original rally car weighed less than 1,000 kilos, 960 kilograms. I think this one is 1,060. Less power than the rally one. So the rally car I think was up, I'm gonna get this wrong, but I think it was about 280 brake horsepower. And this is pumping out about 220, something like that, 210. But the engine tone is really fantastic. It feels so fresh and sweet, pure. It's a very addictive sound. And just, you know you're in a Lancia, looking down at this original Abarth wheel, just really fantastic. This thing is just such a living piece of history. You don't need to be a rally fan to be fairly obsessed with the 037. This is like a unicorn car. They were only supposed to make 200 of these homologated versions of the famous 037 rally car that defied gravity to win the 1983 World Rally Championship. Don't think they made anywhere near that many. So basically this is probably one of about 100-ish cars that were made. This is chassis 33. They're unbelievably rare, the 037 Stradale. Beautiful car, just fantastic. Everything on this thing is original and it feels very light on its feet. Very pure inputs as you'd expect from an 80s wallop homologated car. The thing I like about this car has over the Stratos is that it's got slightly longer wheelbase, a bit more juice and actually a bit less weight.
than the original Stratos, about 20 kilograms in the case of the rally car. Not quite sure how that worked out in this street model, but what a bit of kit. High revving to around 7,200 RPM. A lovely lean into the corner. Really can feel the body roll. That's what develops the grip though, what makes this thing such a sensational car. You climb aboard, step over the roll cage, basically the frame on which the car's built. Unbelievably lightweight. They were known for being fairly brittle. If you did have a crash, the car tended to get wrapped around your ears. But lightness is speed basically, and it's what made this thing so successful. Despite being only rear-wheel drive, mid-engines, the lightweight and the poise and the ability to feel what this car's doing at all times is what gave the likes of Walter Rule back in the day the ability to just do the unthinkable, put this car in front of the Audi Quattro. I've got to just really look after this old girl. They're worth about £1 million these now. I just think that they look sensational. It's a sort of Mad Max of the rally car era. It's a car that looked like it could do anything, and although they were fragile, prone to falling apart if you hit a tree or did a really big jump or something like that, you really could put them through their paces. Just love it. A very pliable car. It's a relatively small cabin, but actually I'm 6 foot. I'm fitting in this pretty well. I do love rallying, and in particular I love what came out of rallying from back in the day, these beautiful boxy, muscular rally cars from Group B, and these homologated gems that just came out of nowhere, these miracles of engineering that graced our streets. Never to be seen again. Just think these things are wonderful. When manufacturers really could make brave statements to produce something that was very, very different. And this was a radically different car for Lancia, although they had pioneered some of the technology on this one from the Stratos. This was a big step where they're trying to take on the monumental resources of Audi. By comparison to the very small squad at Lancia, quite often had to use private funding to get racing teams set up versus the industrial behemoth of Audi, backed by Volkswagen Group, who were building four-wheel drive engineering for the military and then applied that military-grade tech to their rallying. Along came Lancia and have some of that massive kick in the nuts to be beaten by a rear-wheel drive car, largely because of the ingenuity of not just the drivers but also Cesare Fiorio, who had been the team manager for a long time, a principal who knew his way around the rally paddock. And I'm not going to say they cheated, because they didn't. They used the rules to the maximum. But motorsport is full of cheating and rules bending. I remember one team in particular in Formula 3, they managed to get underneath the weight limits by filling the wheels with water when the cars were weighed to get around the minimum weight. Basically ran underweight during the qualifying session. So then got weighed on the heavier tyres. Clever if you can get away with it. Just lovely bit of kit. And it has got a lot in common with the Delta. So when this car wasn't able to win the Rally Championship anymore, 1984, Lancia went back to the drawing board and came up with something even more savage and crazy, for the road at least, the Delta Integrale, which people like me have managed to get their hands on, and won 6 back-to-back Rally Championships. Absolutely incredible. From 1987, back-to-back, 6 years running. Just have to admire it. I think it's just the Italian styling as well, because these cars aren't just functional, they are beautiful. They're absolutely sensational. This one in particular, I just love the dimensions of the car. Just looks like some sort of monster leaping forward at you all the time. Made by Pininfarina and Abarth. I mean, imagine that, those two companies working together to produce this. The shape, the function, the savagery. And that beautiful sound in the engine. It all just comes together to produce this. And you can't forget the interior. These fuses remind you that you're in a rally car. The gauges, they kind of remind you in a rally car, and the feeling through the wheel obviously, but there's these beautiful creature comforts that really only the Italians seem to get at that sort of peak, which is these corduroy seats with a little bit of red piping. It's just fantastic. They really just get all those little attentions to detail correct. Just makes it feel like a really special occasion when you're driving something like this. The lightness of these cars didn't come for free. Audi was weighing in at something like, I think about 200 kilograms heavier on their rally car because of the four-wheel drive system, because you've got twice as many axles doing the work for you than this one, which is rear-wheel drive. And that's what gave this the advantage on smooth tracks like this one at Pembury, because this thing was very deft. You could throw it around, make the car go wherever you wanted, but the weight and the four-wheel drive systems won the days when it was slippery, ice and snow, and maybe a bit better on gravel as well. But let's be honest, this is a street car at the end of the day, so more power to this. But there's some sophisticated work on the dashboard, and it might be quite simple, but it is effective. Little things like door handles just tucked away here into the armrest, and the layout of the pedals, absolutely rally spec, but very Spartan, because you've got an engine sitting behind you, so there's no chance of more seats in the back. For quite a long car, actually it's quite surprising how little space there is inside it. The cockpit is spacious, but the rest, really, it's for that one lucky passenger, and that's about it. Maybe a travel bag, toothbrush. Absolutely incredible. It's an absolute privilege to drive something like this. I just hope I haven't overstayed my welcome. I mean, I tried to milk it for as many laps as I could get with the owner watching. Let's see if he gives me any more. But love it. Lancia is the best. What a day. Okay, so I've done Italian lightweight. Now it's time for the German tank. Straight away, this just feels like a lot more car. Feels like a lot more of a modern car as well. Typical Audi, everything's just a bit more refined. The engine sound is less guttural. Just feels a bit more like a sort of typically sophisticated, slightly reduced road car, even though it's based on the Audi Quattro rally car from the 80s. And this is an 80s model Audi Quattro UR, so it's the original Quattro that was based on that rally car in vastly higher numbers than Lancia managed with the Stradale. So of the thousands that were made, only about 280 were made in right-hand drive spec for the UK. So this one is quite rare, but not compared to a Lancia, which is proper unicorn territory. And the car does feel a lot heavier. So time has aged the brakes and the suspension somewhat, so it's a little bit more rolly, but I doubt that it was as stiff as a 911 back in the day. Like the Lancia, it uses that heft, that body roll to develop grip. But the engine tone, that quite flat sound is very familiar to me from being an Audi driver for many years in my beloved Audi A3. It's quite a familiar tone. And it's delivering its grip and getting the work done in typical Audi fashion. It's just that these days, modern Audis, I mean, they're on train tracks, aren't they? They're so stiff, so wooden. You don't get anything like this amount of body roll, nothing like it. I mean, not even close. But there is a lot in common. You recognise the sort of shape of the gear lever, like I say, the sound of the engine, the ergonomics, they're really sound. It's just a fantastic bit of kit. And dare I say it, typical German engineering from back in the day. This was the time when they were making such amazing strides as a company, really establishing themselves as the front runners, pioneering the four-wheel drive that dominated World Rally Championships until the Lancia came along, of course. What I love about this car, though, is you can really pitch it around, and it is lovely and responsive. It's got no vices, so most of the weight's fairly low down in the drivetrain, both axles giving it their all, and it's done a load of miles. This thing, it's done 134,000 miles, and despite its age, it's car is weathered extremely well. It's got no vibrations under braking. Pedals are a tiny bit soft. That's just bleed the brakes, put new pads in. And gear changing, really easy, really smooth. I suppose the main difference between this and the Lancia, they are chalk and cheese in terms of what you're trying to achieve. That Lancia is a visceral drive. You really feel like you're in a rally car on the road. This, built for mass consumption, for large numbers of people to get in and get a feel for what it was like in a performance car for the whole family. Bearing in mind how many seats this car's got. It's a totally different animal. But actually, it's fairly high revving, and the power is quite high up with lovely dollops of torque, making this thing super drivable. It's really cool. It's also extremely stylish. So a bit like the Lancia, it's got those butch fenders, typical sort of 80s style. I guess it was the time of shoulder pads and big suits, wasn't it? And some seriously cool music. Sort of like the prince of automobiles, these things. These homologated specials. But it's just got it right. There's really good proportions that I think modern cars have struggled to live up to. They sort of look overweight, even though proportions wise they sort of scaled up. The whole of the car has got bigger in modern days for safety reasons and aerodynamics and things like that, but these smaller cars just have that really hench set that makes them so pleasing to the eye. And although you might refer to it as a tank, just because these things were so well made, they were so reliable and a little bit heavy by compared to the Italian rally cars of the day, it's actually a really beautifully set out piece of kit, this. And I think it's one of those cars, comes up when it used to come up behind you in the rearview mirror, it's like, oh, okay, this is a serious car with probably a fairly serious driver at the helm. I am chewing through the fuel. What a surprise. It's got an interesting tank as well. So it really shows you quite specifically how much you've got beyond the empty line. Sort of like a reserve tank situation going on. And very 80s dashboard. So you've got lots of cool big digits. Looks like an alarm clock. Quite ahead of its time, really, if you think about it. Personally, I actually way prefer the original OG tachos with real needles and dials. But this is also just really cool. What's great with this car is that everything works, which for an 80s special is pretty rare. I bet you the stereo even works. Let's have a listen. Let's try this. We've got Blaupunkt OG. No, spoke too soon. The sunroof's going anyway. Lovely bit of kit. Which one's faster on a lap though? 220 brake horsepower this one, from I think it was just about a 2.2 litre turbocharged unit versus the 2 litre supercharged unit in the Lancia. So quite different power delivery. There goes the stereo, so just a slight delay between pressing the button and it turning on when I didn't want it to. Yeah, so power output on this is about what, 240, something like that. But it's interesting, they are a match, as they were back in the day. So slightly more weight from that second driven axle, slightly more power, and they come out about equal. When you feel it, you just think, obviously there's just chalk and cheese in terms of what the value is between these cars. £1 million for the Lancia versus probably about 80k for one of these. And I think you're getting a lot of car here. This is something that's very user friendly. You still take it on a big road trip and have an amazing time in a car that will really deliver and get you out of the driveway when it snows. Love these things. My first proper years racing, my mechanic had one of these. It scared the living crap out of me on a daily basis. Phil, you know who you are. Well, after all that time, no rattles in this car. It's just this thermos in the back. But it's really aged well, you've got to say. I mean, really well. This thing is well built, to say the least. It's a proper keeper. I can't think of many cars from the 80s that would survive this well. Admittedly, it's been kept indoors, so it's not rusted out, but you just get the feeling that these Audis from back in the day were built to last, and they have lasted. Okay, there's a minor creak in the seat. Here's a question. You've got 80 grand, you can buy a brand new Audi. Let's call it, what, an A6, something like, or an RS6. I don't know what's the equivalent of this. Probably an A6. You couldn't say this could live with an RS6. But 80 grand, if you had it, you'd buy the new car or one of these. I'd go for one of these. This thing is just, well, now that I know the radio works, okay, you're not gonna have all the Bluetooth stuff like that, but who cares? This has got so much more character, and it's just much more relaxing to drive. Over a long distance, not having that jarring sensation of being on really, really stiff wooden stilts, I think this is the way to go. Plus, you're gonna get serious nods of approval. You take this across Europe, people will be like, he knows. He knows what he's doing. 80s, I'm telling you, 80s is making a comeback. Starting with the Quattros and the rear wheel drives. And look out for the rear wheel drives, because that's definitely the way forward. They're making a big comeback. I think the whole hypercar craze with multiple engines and four-wheel drive, I think it's coming to an end. I think the rear-wheel drives are where it's happening. That said, for a family Wagen, four-wheel drive with this little bad boy, past could be the future.